American Encounters, Unit 2, Chapter 3, Reading 2, Slavery. The Economics of Slavery. The work of slaves was essential to the agricultural economy of the southern United States, especially for growing cotton. Growing cotton required a large number of workers. For cotton farmers, slave labor was an answer to this problem. However, the economic importance of slavery went beyond the South. Africans who were taken from their villages were loaded onto ships that were owned by businessmen from all over the United States and Europe. The ships sailed to ports in the Caribbean islands and the southern United States, where Africans were sold as slaves. In the Caribbean ports, the ships picked up molasses, a raw syrup made from Caribbean sugar, and brought it to the northern cities such as Boston and New York. The molasses was then made into rum, an alcoholic drink. Some of the rum was shipped to Africa and traded for slaves. The slaves were then shipped to the Caribbean, and the cycle began again. This process was called triangular trade because the path formed a large triangle that stretched across the Atlantic. See Figure 3.1. The cotton was shipped to factories in the northern United States and in Great Britain, where it was made into cloth and sold all over the world. From the 16th to the 19th centuries, about 12 million Africans were sent to the New World, North and South America, as slaves. Only about 5% of them came to the United States. In spite of the importance of the slave trade, many Americans opposed it. In 1807, the U.S. Congress passed a law that prohibited people from importing slaves. However, owning slaves remained legal in many states. Everyone profited from slavery: the cotton farmers, the cloth factory owners, the rum producers, the slave traders, the ship owners, and people who bought cotton cloth. Everyone except, of course, the slaves themselves. The lives of slaves. Unlike most of the people who have come to America, these Africans were brought against their will. Many of them died either in Africa before the journey or during the journey across the Atlantic Ocean, which lasted about 7 weeks. The conditions on ships were dreadful. The passengers were often chained side by side with no space to move. Experts estimate that between 10 and 25% of the slaves died on the journey. The ones who survived were sold. Husbands and wives, children and parents were often separated. They became the property of the people who bought them, with no rights of their own. They had to work long hours. Most worked in the cotton fields, up to 16 hours a day during the harvest. They received poor food and rough clothing and housing. If they disobeyed orders or tried to escape, the punishment was severe and painful. Women had to work until childbirth and return to work immediately afterward. Children began working at the age of 5, and many died when they were very young. Some slaves, especially those who worked inside their owners' houses, lived in better conditions. These house slaves still had hard lives, however, and they had no freedom. The average life of a slave was very short, just 22 years, half that of whites at the time. The end of slavery. The slaves received their freedom at the end of the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, which divided the North and the South. Disagreement about slavery was one of the major causes of the war. The South wanted to preserve slavery. It was essential to their prosperity. The North wanted to end it. In 1863, President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation ended slavery in the South. The North won the war, and in 1865, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution made slavery illegal. Slave narratives. After the end of slavery, some slaves began to tell their stories. Here is part of one of these slave narratives. This narrative is from an interview with a slave named Fountain Hughes. It is written just the way Hughes spoke. Now, I couldn't go from here across the street, or I couldn't go to nobody's house without a note or something from my master. Whoever he sent me to, they would give me another pass, and I'd bring that back to show how long I'd been gone. We couldn't go out and stay an hour or 2 hours or something like that. I couldn't just walk away like the people do now, you know. We were slaves. We belonged to people. They'd sell us like they sell horses and cows and hogs and all like that. They'd have an auction bench, and they'd put you up on the bench and bid on you just the same as bidding on cattle.